everybody. Welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat. Lorin, I think this one's going to get us really fired up. I got a couple of emails and I will say, even just had a personal experience with someone saying, why do the rescues make it so difficult to adopt an animal? All I want to
Uh,
do is help out a being. And after my 10 count became a 100 count, so I didn't respond so quickly. Um, I'm going to give myself a 10 count right now. I turn it over to you. I know
oh,
you've got
sure.
some
Get me in
history.
trouble.
Yeah. I'm going to let you vent before I vent.
Yeah. So, not all of them. Let's say that to begin with, not all of them, but some of the criteria, I have to shake my head at. So when I had my store for a couple of years, I was the president of a local rescue and sat on their board and um, remember probably 6 months in, 6 or 8 months in, of having a board meeting and including the staff and trying to explain to staff that we can adopt some of these animals out or we can never take another animal in because their criteria was so strict and they were so unwilling to consider that anybody else other than themselves could take care of an animal. It was, and you were seeing like at the zoo when animals pace back and forth. I'm, at the shelter seeing animals who've been there for a couple of years that are now doing that. And when you go through each individual animal, what's the problem? And you meet with staff and they tell you, well, I mean, we this particular rescue had the criteria of the entire family needs to come out. We need to meet the whole family. Oh, okay. So they were telling me about, well, this family came out and we were set to adopt them out this cat, but then we found out that grandma was home and she wasn't here with them. And I was like, oh, okay. Why wasn't grandma here? Grandma wasn't there because grandma's not all that mobile, and so she was home and there was a caretaker home with her. She's in the same house. And so if they couldn't meet grandma, they weren't going to adopt out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just not how this goes. And their answer was, we don't want to, get the animal back, and somebody else might in the family might not agree. And I said, you can't do this. I would rather try to put the animal in a home, consider it camp, if nothing else. We send them off to camp.
Socialization. Yeah.
Yeah, for a couple of weeks or months or whatever, and have the criteria that we have to get the kid back if something goes awry. Life happens. It's not ideal. I mean, in my house, it doesn't matter what kind of life would happen. Our animals are part of that, no matter what. But not everybody operates that way.
Right.
And and another example was I had a manufacturer call me and he said, "You deal with animals like all the time." He goes, aren't you on a rescue board? I said, yeah. And he goes, why is it so hard? He said, I said, tell me what happened. And it wasn't this particular rescue. I think he was in downtown LA, Santa Monica, something like that. And the rescues that he was trying to adopt from, he said, we're at our wits' end. We're now considering going and buying a dog. And I was like, okay, tell me what happened. So every time they fill out an application and they try to meet all this criteria, it was just speed bump and stopgap after another being thrown in their way. And he goes, I don't understand. It's a holiday time frame. It's just my wife and I. We don't have anything we want to buy. We have everything we need. And what we want to do is bring another being into the house to love and make part of our family. We have two small dogs now. We were looking at another one. And he said, we just figured that was where we wanted to spend our time and our love and our money. And he said, so we've gone to a number of different shelters and rescues and filled everything else. He goes, and nobody will approve us. He goes, I don't even understand why. So I walk through, tell me what feedback you're getting back. We don't have a dog door. He goes, who has a dog door and lets their small dogs go out a dog door on their own where there's hawks and owls and coyotes and things like that? He goes, I don't even understand that thinking. He goes, our dogs don't go outside to do their business without us with them. I said, okay, well, that's a big plus for you that you
Right.
understand that. He goes, no, we got shot down several times for that. And things like we didn't have a crate. And I said, why do you need a crate? And he goes, well, apparently they didn't approve of the dog not having its own space. He goes, the entire house is their space. We actively live with our animals. So they sleep in our bed and it's like just things that we couldn't even wrap our head around. And he goes, and
Yeah.
we didn't want to lie. And I thought to myself, well, now that you know how the game is played, maybe you
Yeah.
should lie.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? And one of my mantras is it's really too easy to become a pet parent. Um,
Yes, agreed.
and so what's interesting about it is, so I was having the different reaction, which was, listen, in this world, in these days, in these times, I'm glad there are checks and balances. Doesn't sound like there was a lot of balance in those checks that
There's
you're
no
sharing.
balance.
Because you're right. It's like I'm sitting there going, well, I wouldn't be there. What where I was coming back to is I just feel like people think I should just be able to show up and say I want to adopt an animal, and you should be grateful that I want to adopt one of these animals. And that's not how it should work either.
Agreed.
There's got to be a balance. And I will tell you, if we ever needed a proof point, all we got to do is go back to the pandemic.
Right.
All of a sudden, everybody wanted to have a pet at home because they were at home and this and that. And then the minute the pandemic's over, we started seeing these animals. And I know you and I both very much in touch and in some cases deeply in touch with different rescues. And they're getting the animals back. And I mean, that just, ooh, that one kills me. I understand financial things change, but this is a lifelong commitment, and
But don't you think that falls on the rescue or the shelter to have adapted? And granted, this is all 2020 hindsight now, so armchair quarterback, but to have adapted to what's your plan when you go back to work?
oh no, I agree with you. And that's why I say when they're asking questions, I don't think that I again balance, right? Everything in over time and moderation. So not having a dog door, I have never had a dog door, and I
Right.
had big dogs. So I wouldn't pass that one. I don't crate my dogs. I wouldn't pass that. Interestingly enough, when we adopted, we did have folks come out to our house every single time. And so, and I will say, even that is not foolproof either,
No,
right? I've shared the story of Penny. We had 8-foot fences, and this particular dog took it from a sitting position and over. And I found myself running through a busy street to grab her and stand there as cars whizzed by. There was nothing any of us saw or could have predicted that would have prepared or precluded that situation from occurring. What we then knew though was, hey, our home is not safe because she's going to jump sometime when I'm not sitting there. But I do think from your point, um, yeah, and I do know. I mean, again, I've got family members that volunteer at one of the rescues right now, and it's every person there is different. You do get attached to some of these animals. And we had the situation last night where one got adopted, and we all just literally cried tears of joy. We were so happy for that particular dog. And just before we started recording this, two dogs, brother and sister, just got adopted. And I was so excited because they got to stay together. So I mean, when you're dealing with, there's so many things going on at
There
these
is, but you have to also understand that the idea is not to keep the animal in a shelter situation.
correct.
The idea is to get the animal into a loving home. And if you're too strict and too subjective, personally subjective as to what that criteria is, no one's ever going to meet it. I mean, we had a situation where somebody wanted to adopt a cat. I got a phone call on this one, and the guy was enraged because he's like, I'm standing outside your shelter. I'm like, okay, not my shelter, but I get it. And he goes, I want to adopt this cat. Your people will not let me adopt this cat because it's been housed with another cat and their friends. I said, okay. He goes, I don't want two cats. He goes, I want one cat. He goes,
Right.
that's what I can give my time and commitment to.
Yeah.
And he said, and he goes, and it's the way it was handled with your people. I mean, I calmed him down,
Right.
apologized, calmed him down. And he goes, it isn't just that. It's the way it was handled. It was the way I was spoken to. It was the dismissiveness. It was they're in control and they make it clear in no uncertain terms that they get all the say as to whether or not I'm good enough to adopt, an animal. And I think there should be criteria. I think someone should create the criteria that understands rescue and shelters and understands what the criteria should be in general. And if you want to do a home inspection or you want to do any of those things, that's fine. But somebody in the ranks of running that cannot adjust that criteria to decide, well, you're not good enough because these animals aren't getting homes and we're overflowing.
Yeah.
I
I
helped.
100%.
When I had my store, I helped a particular woman who did a lot of rescuing, and she relied on being able to rescue these animals out of the road, fields. I mean, she's been in some scary places. She'd get calls from security guards, an animal being dumped into a parking lot or something like that. And she'd go get this kid. She relied on places to be able to take that kid to. So she worked closely with rescues and shelters. But the bottom line is here, we got to get them into homes. We
Yeah,
got to at
agreed.
least try to get them love and attention and a family, whether that's a
Right.
family of one or 10.
Well, and I think you and I have talked about too. Um, it's also hard to judge that animal. It many times when they're coming in and they're setting up that criteria. We talked about it from the grooming aspect, right? Of just
Right.
sometimes when you get them bathed, fed, cleaned up, haircut, that being that you rescued all of a sudden transforms into a different being. Being treated with kindness
Oh my
just
gosh.
can transform their personality. So when I do agree with when you're setting up well, this particular dog or cat won't be good in a multi-pet household. When are they setting that criteria? How are they determining that? Is it just when they were rescued from horrific situation over, and or like, oh well, they came in with a friend and they're just huddled together in a corner. Well, of course they are. They
Sure.
just won this
Survive.
close. Let's see how it goes. And I do agree with you. It's kind of one of those things too. Not to deviate off into any kind of food and nutrition discussion, but when people go, well, you should only if these only ifs really have to be, as you said, done at a base level of the being, what's in the best interest of that being at the base foundational level. And do you want that being to have a chance at a home, or are you going to preclude that because of some notions that you have? And yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of messed up people out there. So I do think you have to have
You do
criteria.
have to have criteria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to definitely do the background. And I think in fairness too, most of these organizations are trying to set it up so that they're setting up not just the family but also the pet for the best possible
Success. Mhm.
outcomes. And, I think that it's hard. It's so hard. I mean, gosh, I'm on a number of different social media things, and I will say some of the things that literally when I signed up had nothing to do with pets seem to have nonstop, this pet is lost, this pet needs to be adopted. 911, we're in a bad situation here, someone step in and make that rescue call. That's the it's just such a no-win situation.
But you can only house or hold on to so many, and
Yeah,
that was my thing when I was on the board for the rescue group is we're beyond capacity. So if
yeah,
we don't get some of these kids adopted and into homes, we can't take anymore. So we can't save anybody else.
right,
The idea is to continue to try to save kids. And, the problem too with criteria is it's a general criteria, right? I mean, you
right,
create a
right.
general criteria. You have to then take that to the animal in front of you. It's like in nutrition, you feed the animal that's in front of you, health
Yep.
wise, you treat the animal that's in front of you. It's the same thing when you're adopting out. Who is this animal? How well do you know this animal? And remembering that in the current situation, which depending on if it's maybe it's a pound or something like that, sometimes they look like jail.
Yeah,
When you walk up to it, it's like, holy crap. I mean, it's that concrete, groups of dogs, the little workout area. It's that whole geometry. The dog or the cat in that situation, it may not be the same when they get home. So you have to specifically get to know the creatures that are there, at least by interaction and spending the time to understand them. But here's what happens. This is what I faced in that situation when I was having that board meeting and including the staff was they were now attached and they got to know the animal
yeah,
so well that it's like, well, now I'm really going to have total say over where this kid goes because I don't really want to part with it because now I've gotten to know this kid. And this kid is only this way with me. I'm like, you don't know that.
yes, yes.
I've seen kids, I think I told this story once before. Somebody who came into the store and wanted to get rid of his dog and could we help? And I was like, ugh, we did help because it was in the best interest of the dog. And that was not a loving situation. I would go so far as to say I question whether or not this was almost abusive to a degree. This dog loved the human that he had until we found him another human. And the difference that I could see in that dog when the dog would come into the store with a new human who whose entire world was about that dog,
Right.
that dog, the adoration that that dog had for that human, because they never knew it could be that good. They didn't know there was anything other than what they knew. So it's you have to give the opportunity. And to the other side of it, I'm not saying that we just hand them out like lollipops at the dentist's office. We've got to do some basic criteria, but if somebody wants to scam you, there isn't a criteria that you can create that they can't get around. They can, you can set up an appointment for the home and they can create someone's house that you go and see and oh, this is lovely and wonderful. And then that person receives whatever money for allowing that to happen. And then the dog goes into an ugly situation, with dog fighting or whatever. So there's no perfection, but certainly we need to get animals into homes and out of shelter rescue situations somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the other thing too is, boy, that attachment syndrome that you just talked about. I It's tough. It's tough
It's
because
tough.
these people are doing this for the right reasons. It takes a special kind of heart to be able to do that.
Yes.
I've said to my daughter in particular, who thinks about becoming a vet, has been working at the rescue. I'm just like, that is a tough one. To all my vet friends out there, I know your hearts are constantly under pressure. And I think that extends out to the rescue community. And I've seen all different sides of it, just like on the vet side, where it's, I know what's best. I, because you've had to make that decision
Right.
so many times that you then, that's your default. And that's a tough one because you're right. I mean, you just look at the conditions, you look at that being, and you don't want anything negative to happen because they've already been through so much. And to your point, I love that you called that out. But look what can happen. Look at
What
the
can
positive
happen?
possibilities. And that's why you started this. That's why you did this to begin with, to give them a chance at something better.
Right.
Guide that, do your best to help get there. Not always something that is nothing's guaranteed in life. You
No.
know, that's
That attachment syndrome is part of that compassion fatigue umbrella because you mentioned vets, and I'm close enough with several vets that I've heard the stories of an owner coming in and they just want the dog put down. Perfectly
uh,
healthy dog, they don't want to deal with it anymore, and they're here to have the dog put down. And the vet is like, well, can we try to adopt it out? We can house it here and we can find a home. Nope, just put it down. And I've been with friend vets, who are bawling because they're required by law that if
yeah,
the owner wants that and pays for it, that animal has to be put down. Perfectly healthy animal for no reason at all, other than the human's done. So it doesn't even have to be a level of attachment that a rescuer gets. The compassion fatigue umbrella that all of that falls under is exhausting and
yeah,
debilitating. And, it's part of the reason that there's so much suicide in the veterinary world and, the rescue world and that sort of thing. It's really hard on people. And your daughter has a heart, that is massive. So she needs to be prepared for what that's really like if she's actually going to think about that because it's crushing.
yeah. It is, and I think the other element of it too is that it's also crushing when you've done so much and it doesn't work out.
Right.
And I've seen that happening more, just circling back a little bit to they found them homes 2, 3 years ago, and now they're coming back. And it's just this like depth of like sadness for everybody in the process. And it's like, wow, I don't know. The problem for me is not that I'm not compassionate. It's that I just I can't fathom myself getting to that point, to be
But I
honest.
would rather have them come back to to an environment they already knew once than turned
Yeah.
out on the street, left to fend for
Oh,
them their
100%.
own, sold
Yeah.
on Craigslist, any of those things that are vastly more dangerous for the
Yeah.
animal and can
Oh,
end very badly. So it's a tempering of yes, but the animal knew love and a
yeah.
home for 3 years. We could do it again. This
Right.
animal was in a home,
Well, yeah.
you
That's
know.
such a great point. I'm sorry, you just hit on something too that I just said recently to a couple of people close to me that the good news is, much like kids, pets, they move forward.
They
Our
do.
our fur kids, like there, I wish I had that memory. Okay, that was bad 5 minutes ago, but I'm in the now. I'm in the
Yep.
here. And so it's such a great point that you bring up. And I agree with you. And I think that's the part where I shrugged recently and went like, well, they're asking for a question, a reason. Have you really? Because all too often, the choice to adopt was, oh my God, you see how cute that pet is? Oh my God, that dog is amazing. And it's like, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. Have you thought through the processes? I still talk about Penny. I still miss her. But I knew in that moment, I will never be able to keep her as safe as I'm making the commitment to unless I build a 30-foot fence, you know, or unless I have a huge farm that she could just run and herd the cattle.
Which is where
So,
she went, right?
which is where she went. Yeah. And it was awesome because I happen to live out where, that could happen. But that being said, I think that's that other part that is that baseline for me. I'm like, look, you need to think these decisions through because otherwise, much like, well, I'm going to make a decision to go to this fast food place today and that fast food place tomorrow, but I'm going to the organic, farmers market on Friday. People, we just change our minds too often. We're inspired all too often in the moment, but this is a long-term commitment that honestly should not be undertaken without a lot of thought. And I know you and I have had the thought, and as I've gotten a little bit older, mostly from reading my own books that I release, I've learned
Shameless plug.
shamelessly they are not that boring. But what I will say is, I have also kind of come to realize, like, hey, how many more times am I going to go through that process of adopting and adopting and adopting? And I had that conversation with someone who was recently in their 70s, and they asked me that question. And I was like, well, let's just walk through the process. Everything from what kind of dog, what's the environment, to what happens if tomorrow. And that's not because of your age. We all should be thinking about that.
Right.
But your odds are a little bit higher. So let's recognize that. What's the plan? How do we account for that?
Well,
And
even if
so,
it's not age, car accidents,
oh,
illness,
yeah, that's what I'm
anything
saying.
like,
Anything,
yeah,
yeah. It's got, and that's where it's that balance again between we don't want to just, this isn't a drive-through. Here's your puppy, sir. Here's your
right,
cat, sir. It's okay. Have you really thought this through? What's your environment like? What's your commitment like? Because we're trying to do the best for this beautiful being who's already, for some reason, most often of nothing of their own doing, has already gone through a trauma. So let's not have, you know, that compounded if we can avoid it. You
right.
seem like a great person, but let's talk this through. And I think that's the other thing too that I guess somewhat grabs me sometimes is we're in such a society of like I can get this or that. I've got 10,000 channels. If I don't like this show, I'll turn to the next show. Um, which don't do that. This is your favorite podcast, everybody. Uh, but it's that whole instant gratification, and I think that's part of the where I think I also am seeing more frustration from people that it's like, how dare you question me? I should be honored for wanting to do this. You should. This is great. This is a thank you for being someone's answer. But let's make sure you're the right answer for that right being instead of, because that's one thing too is there's so many senior dogs, so many senior cats
Oh,
that wow. And that breaks me up.
yeah.
That's
People
something.
drop them off because they don't want to see they're old and I know they're going to go soon. And I don't think I can bear that. What?
Oh yeah,
I hope you're alone when you die. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, what do this is not what happens. You see
right,
someone through if you love them.
right.
When you were talking earlier, that reminded me of the guy and his wife who showed up at the shelter to trade in
Oh
like a
God, no,
car. Right.
no, no, no.
We've had that. How long have you had that dog? Oh, he looks at her. I think 3 years, right? 3.5 years. Why are you bringing the dog here? We just think we'd like something a little bit different.
Oh
Okay.
my.
It's not a
So
car,
right.
butthead.
Oh,
I was like, oh yeah. I mean, my staff, the shelter staff was like, what? I took that one. I was like, yeah, no. You want to drop the dog off and we'll take the dog in? That's fine. You will not be adopting something else from here.
hell no.
Can
Oh
you
my,
even imagine? And I wanted the dog because it's like, I don't know what you're going to do with the dog. So you want to bring the dog here? That's fine. We'll take the dog in. But you aren't ever adopting a dog here or cat,
wow.
anything, a guinea pig,
Yeah.
nothing,
Mm-mm.
nothing. Yeah. Why don't you
Yeah.
trade it in and actually use the words, hi, we'd like to trade this dog in for another one.
Eat it. And that
And
is
I sort of laughed because I thought, joking, right? Not
right.
joking.
Yeah. I honestly, Lauren, I like
Yeah. Yeah. It was
you have great,
appalling.
yeah, you have greater grace for people than I probably would have
Oh,
had.
no, no. It just, yeah. Mm.
That's,
You,
I mean,
I wanted to protect the shelter, so belting somebody probably would not have been a good thing to do for the shelter's
it's
sake.
like
But
showing up at the school and like, hey, can I trade my third
my
grader in
kid,
for a
yeah,
first grader?
yeah,
Because
he's
that
growing too soon.
yeah, there were so many cute plays, and
Hmm.
I love Stone Soup, and I want to see that again. And
Yeah,
boy, that just wow, that one blows my mind there,
yeah,
Lauren.
it blew
That's
mine. Yeah, when
that's
you
that.
think you've heard it all, people never cease to amaze you. They'll still come up with something else, and it's like I cannot even believe that this is happening right now. And
And that's
the dog's all
yeah,
happy looking up at his mom and dad and
no idea.
interested in the barking and the things that he hears, and all that kind of stuff. So he was a happy dog,
Yeah.
but I'm like, oh my God, no, no.
Well, and what just struck me, what's so crazy, and that is, I know there are listeners out there right now. I know you're going, Lauren, Rob, you haven't heard the half of it.
Tell
So
us.
yeah, they have to share some of this with us. So definitely send it out. We'll share some. We'll read some. We'll probably get angry at some with you.
Yeah,
In support and solidarity. I think all of us just want to see a better world for all these amazing beings. And so, and if you got tips, what's your criteria? What works for you all? And maybe, hey, maybe there's something that you ask that we've mentioned, or people say, hey, that's none of your business. Explain to us, help us share that
yeah.
information out to people, why
Well,
that's
tell us why you've turned people down. And for shelters and rescues that do adopt out frequently, tell us your criteria. We can
right.
share that. We have a lot of rescues and shelters that follow, and as you can see, we're very pro rescue and shelter. Dogs and cats and animals. So whatever we can share with people, we're all in this for the same reasons, I hope. If you're not in this for the betterment of animals, go find another podcast.
Exactly. But if you have some of those stories and some of those responses, make sure to send it to us at our email, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. You can visit us on all the different social media channels, outlets, our website, all those wonderful things. But if you are one of those wonderful people that are working at the rescues, thank you. I
Thank
want to
you.
make sure we express that you are a difference maker, you are appreciated, and I can't say it enough times. Thank you, thank you, thank you
Yes.
for all that you're doing. All right, everybody. On that note, thanks for joining us here again for another Practical Pet Chat.
Bye, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.